Hi, my name is Rachel Heffer and I serve as Head of Mission at the Evangelical Alliance.
And I'm Phil Knox. I'm the Evangelism and Missiology Senior Specialist, also of the Evangelical Alliance.
And we are here to introduce you to the Finding Jesus research, identifying pathways to faith in adulthood. This is a landmark study from us at the Evangelical Alliance to reveal how adults are becoming Christians at the moment. So we wanted to know and to share with you, what is it that starts a journey of faith? Who helps along the way? What finally inspires people to make a decision to follow Jesus? What equips them to get started and to keep going as a disciple? Over the next little while together, we will give you these answers from our survey to all of these questions and more. And we hope and trust that it will encourage you that God is on the move in a remarkable way in drawing people to himself.
One of our great passions is trying to understand the pathways by which people are coming to faith and exploring the kind of common themes on these journeys. The reason we're interested in this is because if we can find out how people are coming to faith, then first of all, we can encourage the church that it's happening in the first place, and then we can offer insight into how it's happening and help equip and inspire best practice in contexts across the UK. Rach and I interact with leaders on a daily basis, and every leader we know wants to be a good steward of their evangelistic energies and resources. And we believe that this research will help us all to do that really well.
So how did we get here? Well, we wanted to hear directly from adults who had become Christians in the last 5 years. So to do this, we engaged two brilliant and experienced researchers, Dr. Ruth Perrin, Fellow of the University of Durham, along with Joe Wharton, who had both conducted many studies in the area of discipleship. After we'd agreed the initial parameters, we constructed a 15-minute online survey for new Christians to fill in. For a qualitative study like this, 100 participants is enough to gather some robust data and conclusions. So this was our initial target. However, the first piece of good news was that we had almost 3 times the responses that we needed, and we ended up hearing from about 280 people. We then conducted hour-long interviews with 20 of those to do a deeper dive into what was going on.
And so here we are with the results. We hope they cause you to celebrate, we hope they encourage you, but we also hope they equip and inspire you on how to reach your friends who aren't yet Christians. If you're a leader, we hope they shape and hone your churches or organisations' practice to be even more effective in the area of mission and evangelism. Are you ready?
So the research is broken down into 3 main stages. First of all, we wanted to know what happened before conversion, what started the journey. Then we wanted to ask what happened at that point of decision making. And then we wanted to find out what had happened since people had become Christians. But to begin with, we want to show you and share with you who responded and show you their backgrounds. It's important to note at this stage of the study, of this size, we didn't deliberately set out to have a demographic that completely mapped onto the whole population, but we were surprised and encouraged that it was largely representative. So who do we have in our study? Well, as you can see, 55% of our respondents were women, 45% were men, 77% were white British, again, largely in line with the UK population. When it comes to age, take a look at the spread across the ages. People of all ages are coming to faith. We expected this to be much more weighted potentially towards younger generations based on previous and current studies. But then take a look at the average income too across households. We're aware of some of the disparities in wealth across the nations, and we wanted to know what faith journeys look like across the socio-economic spectrum. We were really encouraged that those, again, are coming to faith from every background and setting.
We also wanted to know what people's previous experience of faith was and what kind of worldview and religious backgrounds they held. And as you can see, we've got a really large percentage of what we'll call cultural Christians, i.e. we saw that 38% of individuals would tick a box or identify as Christian on a survey, but weren't necessarily committed to faith or practicing faith in their everyday lives. 21% said they would define themselves as spiritual but not religious, 15% disinterested in matters of faith, 11% agnostic, 10% atheist, and 8% follower of a different religion. Only 21% said they had no contact with church or any Christian background.
So here's a quick summary for you. All ages, all backgrounds and ethnicities and stories are coming to faith. How exciting is that? And whatever your context, we hope and trust that there is something here for you. So let's begin with part 1 to start the journey. What is happening before people come to faith? Now, a quick note about the slides that you'll see. You may notice that some of the percentages do not always add up to 100%. And that is because participants that we surveyed could select more than one or any that applied. So first of all, we asked, what prompted you to begin exploring the Christian faith? And what we found here is that there were 3 main themes that were emerging in the answers that were given. The first was what people identified was that they had internal needs or challenges. The top answer was that they were needing help with life. After that, we have that they were looking for meaning, often from painful or difficult experiences. We see this in response to the meaning crisis around us. Many have described this as a perma-crisis, an extended period of instability or insecurity, often brought on by a series of catastrophic events. One participant described looking at the world and seeing so much evil. Another said that they just felt that something was missing from their life.
The second big theme that prompts exploration is relationship with Christians. They saw the impact of Christianity on someone that they knew. A Christian speaking to me about their faith. The actions of a Christian towards me. If you're a Christian and you have not yet Christian friends, we want to affirm you that your witness, actions, invitation, and conversation are really powerful. This quote from one of our interviewees that you can find in the report. Ming had bought himself a Bible in Hong Kong before moving to the UK. A college tutor then invited him to church, and he loved being part of the community. After lots of reading the Bible, asking questions, and spending time with Christians, Mingup stayed up one night thinking really hard about his life. And around 3 a.m., he made the decision to follow Jesus. Come on.
And the final big theme, which will reappear throughout this research, is that of spiritual experiences, which more often than not began people's journeys. We found that 28% of people described that a spiritual experience prompted them to begin exploring the Christian faith. Participants mentioned explicitly feeling and hearing God. Exciting for us to know that God is on the move, drawing people to himself. This quote came from one of our participants. They said this, I wasn't considering becoming a Christian. I was looking for friends and feeling really overwhelmed with many burdens that I was carrying in this part of my life. I went along to church because I had nothing better to do, and I was invited by a friend of mine. I arrived feeling upset, but I felt God talking to me. And after that, I couldn't stop crying for half an hour. I surrendered my life to Jesus at that very moment.
Okay, so then we moved on from what prompted initial exploration to what helped along the way. And we want to highlight the top 5 key themes here. And number 1 was attending church. This was helpful for 59% of people. Churches are doing a great job at helping people on the journey of faith, better than any other factor. Well done, church. Check out this from one participant. Carly found herself, she was struggling to raise young children in a city where she knew no one and had no support. Then one day she plucked up the courage to walk into a toddler group run by a local church. The volunteers who ran the group made her feel so welcome and introduced her to other parents. After a couple of months, Carly felt so at home with this group of people, she wanted to take her whole family to that church's Sunday service. This is where her journey of faith began and what helped along the way. Isn't that absolutely brilliant?
So encouraging for the local church, isn't it? Number 2 was reading the Bible. Almost half of our participants read the Bible on their way to making a decision to follow Jesus. Donnie, for example, found in our report, described how he had read the entire Bible starting at Genesis. He said this, by the time I was in Exodus, I'm a full believer. By the time I got to the New Testament, it had broken my heart. When I got to the true story of Jesus, I was a broken man. I just had an absolute love for Jesus and what he had done for me. How encouraging, the transforming power of the Bible.
Number 3, attending a course. People specifically mention Alpha and Christianity Explored and the power of exploring faith in community. One interviewer recalled a woman who journeyed with her through a course exploring the Christian faith. She said she was just awesome. She would come round regularly and we'd meet together. We did Christianity Explored together. And then we'd do a Bible study, just meet up for coffee and a catch up. She'd message me regularly. And I just felt she was there for me when I needed her. And likewise, I hope that she felt the same about me.
How encouraging. Number 4, we asked the question, what helped along the way? And we found this, that 39% of people said it was some sort of spiritual experience, and 37% said it was a direct result of answered prayer. In our report, we learn about Luke. Luke's parents and sister were Christians, but he'd never believed. In his 40s, his job enabled him to travel, but also to experiment with drugs along the way. And in his own words, he was his own sort of God. He wasn't happy, but he came across Christian content on YouTube and started listening to worship music, having conversations along the way with his mum. One day he was smoking weed in his garden shed and he just began confessing his concerns, his life to God. And he described what he felt was like a warm electrical feeling. And even in that moment, he threw his drugs in the bin and his life was transformed.
Come on. Number 5, what carried people along the journey? For many people, it was time with Christians, growing friendships, hospitality, patient conversation, and discussion with people, often in the most random of places. One of these was we had a fascinating dialogue with Rupert, who was a retired academic. He started conversations regularly with his Uber driver, and the driver invited him to do Alpha. He loved it and soon became part of a church community. Well done, Rupert, and well done to that Uber driver.
Following on from this, we wanted to know who had helped the most alongside people exploring the Christian faith. And again, here is what we found. Number 1, 35% of our participants told us that it was a person or people from church other than the church leader. Here's one example. A co-worker encouraged me, we heard, to come to their weekly life group and to church. They were offering me a lift or to dinner, and they made it really easy for me to get there. They were patiently answering my questions that I had about all different aspects of faith.
Number 2, 33% of those who came to faith said it was a close friend who was impactful in their journey towards Jesus. One participant shared their gratitude for this person. They said it was a Christian friend who just never gave up on me. The power of friendship is massive in helping people come to faith.
And when we asked again who was most important in your journey towards faith, number 3 was that 28% of people suggested it was that small group of Christians that they joined and became embedded within and a part of. Many participants told us that it was really impactful for them to be seen and heard and loved. Many commented on how powerful it was when people as simple as remembered their name and asked them about events or work from the previous week and how they'd gone. 23% went on to tell us that they spoke about the helpful input from church leaders. One of our respondents said this. He said, "My pastor was patient, kind, and gentle with me in a way that I didn't expect. I expected to be rejected when I even walked into the church, but I was welcomed and loved and given ample opportunity to ask questions."
Absolutely brilliant. Well done, that church leader. We also heard that 19% of the adults surveyed mentioned the input from family members that helped kind of shape their faith journey. And we love this from one participant. They said, "My mum, she gracefully and slowly over many years talked to me, encouraged me, challenged me, and reminded me that I didn't need to have everything sorted before I came to Jesus. Instead, I could come as I am and he would help me. She showed me Jesus so clearly and I'm forever grateful. She said, I'm now a youth minister and living life for him every day." What an encouragement to all of you who are praying parents out there.
Me included. The headline here for us is that for many, there is still a misconception that professional Christians are mostly responsible in people coming to faith. And the reality is that we all get to play our part. We asked people, what did these people do in helping you to become a Christian? And here is what they said. They reported time and time again that they gave time, they gave patient discussion, It was hospitality and kindness that shone through, that the people around them were an authentic example and a follower of Jesus. How encouraging that you and I don't need a PhD in apologetics, but it's kindness, discussion, and living differently.
Here are some quotes from some participants who talked about the roles people played. The Christians I spoke to took the time to listen and address the difficulties I was going through in changing my perspective and understanding. They talked honestly about their experience of faith, their personal struggles, questions they asked, and how Jesus was there through it all. My close friend took the time to understand the reservations. She also created a safe space for us to openly discuss our beliefs and faith. And the leader of my Alpha course was incredible and set up the perfect environment from the start. He was incredibly patient, and I felt he demonstrated the values of Jesus in a way that I'd never seen before.
The final thing we wanted to ask in the journey towards faith was how long it took people. And you may be interested to know that people are coming to faith really quite quickly. For 59% of those surveyed, their journey from starting to explore the Christian faith to the point of them making a decision to follow Jesus was actually less than a year, with 32% of people it being even within 6 months. Some of our friends and family members may seem long and far away, but they may just be closer to Jesus than you actually think. How encouraging that is as we think about the people God has put around us.
Yeah, there you go. So that's part one. That's what's starting the journey. Now we come to part two of the research, which zooms in on the moment that people finally made a decision to become a Christian. If you're interested in the conversion moment, this is the bit for you. So this was the key question. We asked people what finally prompted them to make a decision to follow Jesus. Participants could choose up to 3 answers, and this is what they said. The top answer was that 39% said it was as a direct result of having had an experience of God. Here's some examples of the participants who quoted this. One referenced a dream followed by a prayer. Another mentioned being healed of anxiety and depression. Another said an answer to my prayers that filled a missing gap in my life that changed my life. An experience of God was the top answer at this stage.
The next top answer as to what led to people's actual decision to follow Jesus was that 27% of people said it came as a direct result of having read and believed the Bible. One participant said to us, "I just read about Jesus and I felt moved to follow him." Zoe told us that she'd started reading the Bible by herself and she had come across some Christian content on TikTok, and that's what started her interest. She found herself particularly moved as she read about God's grace in Paul's letter to the Romans. And after reading this, she found a church and wanted to see more about what life and faith looked like in her real life.
Others spoke of the impact of belonging to a church or going to a course like Alpha and Christianity Explored. As we'd mentioned, following that, 19% talked about having an impactful and interesting conversation with a Christian friend. That was the moment that they chose to follow Jesus. And 18% recalled that God had answered prayers at that moment, and that was the point of conversion for them.
So we can see here that some of the themes that emerged in this exploration phase remain there in that decision moment too. People having experiences of God, their prayers being answered, and reading the Bible. These things are also helping people finally make the decision to become Christians. There are some other really interesting answers here as well. Listening to sermons or talks, we were told, has helped conversations with church leaders, but also people's beliefs. It's interesting that 34 people told us that it just felt like the right thing to do. 30 people said it was hearing someone's testimony, and 26 said that to them it just made intellectual sense.
We've been fascinated to learn more about how in the last 5 years, many people who become Christians have reached that point of decision. We've been interested to read that 42% said they became Christians on their own. It's interesting to think that if you combine that with the top 2 answers from the previous slide, that forms a picture of people reading the Bible on their own, having an encounter with God quite privately and individually, and kind of that being the moment that they give their life to Jesus.
Fascinating. And alongside the 42% of people who said that they learnt and accepted Jesus privately and whilst on their own, we do also see that 18% of people told us that they reached that point of coming to faith by being on a course. 10% also said it was by public invitation at a church or an event, and 10% said it was with a friend. Only 5% of people cited a Christian event. So there really is a balanced mix between people becoming Christians in a public and private environment. And this should encourage us to keep on giving those public opportunities, but also equipping people seeking to make decisions in their own time and space, but also giving Christians the tools to be able to help their friends make a decision.
Yes, it's really significant for us. People are coming to faith in all different ways, times and spaces, and to hear a few more quotes of people describing the moment itself. One person said this, it was whilst at home during the ministry time at the end of an online service. Another recalled, it was on my way home from an Alpha Course away day. I got prayed for at the end of the day. I was alone in the car. I had to pull over as I started crying, and it was that point I became a Christian. And another person said, the day after watching a sermon, I found myself lying face down on the floor of my house, begging God to save me. I'd never prayed in my life before. I called out to God and he heard my cry. The peace was instantaneous. Isn't that cool?
Hope you too are encouraged by these stories. It's amazing for us, isn't it? How encouraging for us. We should never underestimate what God does in the private spaces of people's lives as well as in the open space. Sometimes we just don't know what God is doing, and that's okay. Finally, in this section, we wanted to know which aspect of the gospel most drew people to Jesus. We looked at 7 different components of the good news, and we asked participants to tell us which to them were most compelling. And our findings showed this, that the top answer at 48% was that Jesus loves me. Secondly, at 46% was that they found they could have hope and purpose for my life now and beyond. 34% of people said that for them it was because the gospel is true, profound and beautiful. Interesting that this was the most popular response amongst participants under the age of 25.
But for others, the elements of the gospel that drew them to Jesus was that Jesus could help me with my problems and pain, allow me to not fear death and judgment, assure me that my shame and burdens could be lifted, and many answers besides, all demonstrating to us as Christians and leaders that people come to faith for all kinds of reasons. And we hope that this variety of access points will encourage preachers communicating the good news moving forwards, especially as the data is broken down into the kind of different demographics. Lots of different on-ramps in lots of different contexts to why people become Christians.
So this is what is happening at the point of conversion. Let's move on to our final section where we asked those 280 participants what life had been like since becoming Christians and what had helped them along the way. Firstly, we asked about this. What are the challenges that you have faced since becoming Christian? And here is what our participants told us. The top 2 standout answers were these. It was around spiritual disciplines. Almost half of our participants said that they had found learning how to pray and making sense of the Bible really challenging. So when it comes to discipling new believers, how helpful to know that these are clearly the areas for us to work on.
The next answer was that 36% of people mentioned the challenges of needing to change aspects of their lifestyle, as well as understanding aspects of faith such as suffering, hell, other religions, etc. Clearly for new believers, there's a kind of mindset and behavioural shift that takes place as God renews us, and this can be both challenging and uncomfortable.
And finally, we learnt that for many new Christians, the responses from their non-Christian friends and family members or colleagues had been deeply challenging for them. Some told us they had a fear of losing friendships when friends didn't quite understand this change in their life. As new Christians, they also had become aware of their need and their desire to gradually change in their habits or areas of language or lifestyle or relationships, etc. From the stories that we heard, it became evident that these were often quite messy transitions. This is also a really important factor for us in church and as leaders to bear in mind and show care, patience and support when welcoming, nurturing and discipling these wonderful new believers.
Nice problem to have though, eh? We went on to then ask what had been most helpful since becoming a Christian. In response to this question, participants cited a whole range of activities, and here's what people said. Reading the Bible alone and praying alone were the top two answers at 30% and 26% respectively. Then corporate activities such as worship and reading the Bible with others, getting baptized was significant for 19%, followed by experiences of God. People also cited that being part of a church, praying with other people, sermons, small group resources were also extremely helpful to them. It seems that once again there's this kind of coexistence of the personal and the private going along. Moments alongside people, togetherness with groups, and Christians are significant on the discipleship journey.
So against that backdrop, we're nearly there in our introduction for you into the findings of this Finding Jesus research. We've got a few suggestions, however, for what this might mean in terms of how we, you and us, take this forward as the church across the UK. But before we do, we asked each participant what difference following Jesus had made in their life. And we'd love to read you a few incredible stories that are in the report, but here are just a few to whet your appetite and encourage you.
This is a great bit, Rach. One participant said, I've gone from unholy to holy. I see the world as Jesus sees it and pray every day. I've been transformed from the inside and become a better parent, a loving neighbour, and now I'm setting up a charity to help others every day. God, isn't that great?
Another new Christian told us, my life has been utterly transformed. I went from being totally disinterested in Christianity to being really involved in the life of my church and being full of joy.
Another reported that the difference has been incredible. I don't and will never know what I was waiting for. Knowing that I have Jesus by my side is the best feeling. I don't feel like I need to find satisfaction in anything else. I feel like I have direction and purpose, but most importantly, I have peace.
Isn't it just amazing to hear of story after story of people's lives changed and, as you've heard, turned inside out due to being loved and witnessed to by Christians, transformed by the truth of the Bible and hugely encountering God by His Spirit? We hope you've been really encouraged by hearing of some of these findings from the Finding Jesus research. But what now? What does this look like in your or my context?
So we would encourage you practically to do two things. First of all, download the Finding Jesus report at findingjesus.co.uk or contact us for your free printed report. You heard that right, free. Get in touch if you'd like either Rachel or myself to come and join your church, your staff or leadership team, conference, board meeting, leadership away day to discuss the research, the findings and the key learnings with you. For now, here are 5 top takeaways for you. First of all, God is on the move. Through dreams, answered prayer, other spiritual experiences, Jesus is drawing people to Himself and instigating many people's journeys. We should celebrate this as the church, be encouraged and be ready for people like this to walk through our doors.
Secondly, let's be really prayerful and really intentional, sharing the good news of Jesus at every given opportunity. Every day, thousands of people across the UK connect with our churches, whether it's through food banks, toddler groups, youth ministries, street pastors and more. Just imagine what could happen if each one of those individuals were given a gospel, invited to church, or personally invited to join a course to explore the Christian faith. Why not challenge ourselves to be just a little bit bolder and braver with our invitations?
Thirdly, we want to encourage you that relationship is central. Whilst many people start their journey on their own and choose to follow Jesus by themselves, the study shows the overwhelming significance of friendship, hospitality, patient discussion, and the role that the church is playing for people along the journey. Let's continue to build intentional relationships wherever we are.
Remember too the immeasurable power of the Word of God. Alongside spiritual experiences, the Bible comes out time and time again for playing a really significant part in people's exploration, conversion, and their early steps. We should consider together how we get the Word of God into people's hands as early as possible, how we encourage Christians too to read the Bible with their friends and be unashamed and unapologetic about how important it is for non-believers as well as existing followers of Jesus to dip into the Word of God.
And finally, we want to encourage you to keep listening. While there are some themes that stand out in a major way, people are coming to faith in a really varied and multitudinous way. Just the question on which aspect of the gospel drew people to Jesus should cause us to wonder again and study afresh the beauty of the good news. But as people are coming to faith in our nations, may we continue to ask how it's happening and look to partner with God and join in with what He's doing.
So, against the backdrop of all of that, we hope that you've been massively encouraged by these key messages emerging from this Finding Jesus research. There are many, many more stats and stories in the full report, so feel free to download at findingjesus.co.uk. We pray that whatever your role in the church, that this report will inspire you and better equip you to make Jesus known. Let's hope that we make the most of this opportunity and play our part individually and together to see many come to know the glory of God.
So thanks for joining us. For more resources across Finding Jesus, more research from the Evangelical Alliance, and deeper reflections on mission and evangelism, check out findingjesus.co.uk. But for now, God bless you, and thank you so much for being with us.